This dishonest man was stuck in a scary professional situation, which they had to sit in close proximity of some of the least clean people in Hollywood traits, taking in their air, taking up room together, and keeping his cool and unflappable behavior while going through sensory attacks that would have made most people run away from the building. The following are the NBC executives thought these true stories would never be found. The unpleasant what really happened behind the scenes with Johnny Carson stayed strong for the sake often in games. These aren't just funny true stories. These are shocking facts about what really took place when the film stopped, and the smell too much to handle for even TV's best skilled producer to hold on. That's right. I can't handle it well, you and MC don't really, getting drunk is really hard for me. Not at all, don't really. Point 6. Those who smoked a lot, a poisonous cloud of famous people smell. Before we start, as for specific criminals, we must take note of the nauseating baseline the conditions Carson had to deal with during the first 20 years of his lease. The clean TV of today companies have nothing to do with the toxic setting of the 1960s and 1970s, sending out signals, a real fog-off chemicals that cause cancer that made what many years on the team called celebrity soup. It wasn't just smoky in the studio. It was a dangerous place that would not follow any safety rules at work today, made public former NBC page Thomas Williams. Famous people would smoke a lot through pre-ins, keep going during parts, and leave behind a disgusting tobacco film that covered every surface. Things were set up 10 times worse by the celebrities who smoked and did drugs together. Other strong marks. Betty Davis, 23, AA regular guest, made what crew members called the Davis Cloud in secret, an unpleasant mix of her trademark. There were cigarettes, strong cologne, and bourbon. Wet breath that changed the game. The studio's air quality is good. After Davis showed up, we had to use industrial fans between takes, set designer admitted Martha Lewis. The way she smells would remain for so long that guests planned after her would sometimes note, did B. Davis just leave, without being told she had been there. It seemed like her ghost was still there. Furniture. Dean Martin raised the challenge to truly shocking levels when he showed up, mixing cigarettes with he was known for drinking a lot. What people never saw was the troubling in the fact that by the time Martin the couch, he had already eaten a lot, drunk so much that his pores were putting it out into the air, actually all around him. Dean was sitting next to it's like getting hit by a wave. Carson once told his manager something private. Following a particularly strong Martin, how they look. It wasn't just breathing. It was going through his skin. I can taste it in my mouth while I try to talk to him. What this did to the Phidias host could only be seen by those who knew him very well. Teresa, a makeup artist Williams, remembered the scary ritual after part. Johnny did it. Go to his changing room right away. Which is where he kept a special mouthwash. He said he could smell and taste their cigarettes even though he hadn't smoked. Hugh would gargle so hard that I was scared he could hurt his throat. So many bad things happened that during a 1974 show by star George Segal that is really scary. Something happened behind the scenes. Segal had been known to smoke a lot. Been puffing away for so long that as the show went to commercial, Carson was being seen quietly throwing up in a wastebasket that was too heavy for the concentration of fair conditioned smoke near him. Hi, John never bragged on TV. Never, pointed out former NBC boss Frank. That night, though, he told the chief director of either Segal John did not need to stop smoking or leaving the set. It was the only time ever seen him do something like that. What people watching at home never knew was that Carson's well-known water sips were good for more than just his throat. Were a last-ditch effort to fight the house sitting in what dries you out for 90 minutes. It was like being in a smoke bath each night. His poker game is worthy of a documentary. Face hid the disgusting truth that Carson's fingers were under the desk. Would often turn white as he held his chair. But I didn't want to leave the poisonous cloud that was around him. Have you heard the one about the woman visits the dentist? I lost a tooth. Yes. He looks in the mouth and says that tooth will have to 5. Buddy Hackett, also known as the human sprinkler. Buddy Hackett, a famous comedian, made over 100 times on The Tonight Show, making people happy with his laughter with rubber faces and wild but the scary truth behind the stories. These talks that seem happy would have scared watchers if they knew what Johnny was really going through. What medical experts say they had when hypersalivation is mixed with an obvious lack of awareness of the idea of found place. This is what happened. Tonight Show staff talked about in screams of horror as the splash zone, the area around Hackett that would end up drenched by the end of his parts. It wasn't just sometimes spit, it was a steady spray that revealed that his excitement grew. Martinez, who holds the card. The first 3 around Buddy was mostly just a mist. Johnny would come back from work breaks where his suit jacket can be seen spotted with water. This is disgusting. Carson, whose dislike of bodily fluids was well known, recorded and created specific defensive ways to do Hackett interviews that people who were paying attention might have seen. Worked on what staff called the Hackett lean, which looks like a relaxed position that actually increased his speed while looking engaged. What was more shocking was the breaking news that Carson wore a suit that was treated for Hackett looks. The wardrobe put on a clear, water-resistant adding a coating to Johnny's clothes for Hackett days. According to Carson's personal dresser, Harold Ming did the same thing. Used on raincoats and changed to look. Johnny made them look relaxed on camera. After an interview that got really wet in 1968, when Hackett's stories stopped, Johnny's sleeve had clear drops that the camera caught. A unsettling event happened during appearance in 1975, when Hackett became especially excited while telling a Vegas story. In his excitement, he let out what one shocked camera operator called it a full-on spray that hit Johnny in the face right away. People saw Carson throw his head back. As they laughed, they missed the scary truth. He was badly taking spit out of his eyes during the side shot. Following that event, Johnny changed into a whole new outfit. Uncovered while waiting in his locker room. Kevin Bartley is a production helper. As soon as the part was over, he ran off. Sat down, stripped down, and took a shower before going back for the next guest. He was that scared. Makes this situation even more. What's shocking is that despite this disgusting, Carson continued to invite people with experience Hackett back over and over. This wasn't it showed just efficiency. Carson knows that great TV stations sometimes needed personal sacrifice, as he made a mean joke to Ed. McMahon after a Hackett that was especially wet. I should have a Purple Heart. And risks for that interview. The team built complicated methods to manage what they called Hackett in a roundabout way. The fallout, which included a Hackett towel that is only used to dry the host's desk and chair. After the most upsetting were the comedian's shows. Best of all was the news that the famous Tonight Show's furniture, the whole couch, had to be replaced. After a stretch of 3 Hackett Mania shows in 1 month. War even though the cloth is waterproof. Medical care. There is a nickel double on Penny Singleton. All going coins. Pump a dime. Choose one. I'm in. There's trouble up here. Point 4. Rip Taylor, the person who erupts. He is known as the king of confetti because often to throw away paper scraps in the crowd. Rip Taylor brought a lot of energy to every TV show, but his appearance on The Tonight Show in 1977 turned out to be known as famous among the crew for talking about that network executives tried to hide the story for many years. Taylor had already shown up at the office. Shown signs of what production papers were later politely called overheating and sweating. The truth, several witnesses said, that was far even scarier. Taylor seemed to be actively melting because of what many people thought were powerful. I've never seen anything like this before, nothing like it on TV in 40 years, brought up lighting director Samuel Peterson. He wasn't just damp, he was getting wet. It looked like his body was constantly pushing out all moisture. Because of the every time he hit the couch, a see-through sheen that covers the whole. Carson's response, on the other hand, hidden from watchers, was written about in several accounts for staff. When Taylor first asked them to shake hands, Johnny looked like he was thinking before vowing to say the greeting, a microsecond of hesitation that spoke many people who knew of his fears of pollution. What the came Rashid the fact that Carson was wiping, putting his hand on the desk below. Right after that, Johnny's hand came away literally dripping. Thomas Allen is in charge of the floor. The look on but his face showed that he was really scared. He got better right away. The professionalism was out of this world. As the conversation went on, the situation grew worse until it was really scary size and shape. In the hot studio lights, Taylor's sweating got worse to amounts that were dangerous for electronic things. His polyester shirt got so full of color that it changed on camera, changes from light blue to navy because it took in far too many of sweat. The most shocking thing happened during a very interesting story when Taylor jumped up to show the sudden movement was a physical comic bit. Created what one cameraman talked about in his autobiography as a real-life spray pattern that briefly showed up in the studio. It looks like sprinklers. Droplets. It must have rained on Carson's desk, making a situation so upsetting that later, Ed McMahon said he almost off-air, Johnny's face looked stupid. Froze in what we called his crisis mask, the phrase he used when something terrible things were going wrong, but he couldn't believe it, remembered producer Michael Sloan. His eyes lit up. 1000 why look while he smiled, fixed on what looked like a man's face. Going through terrible stress while acting like everything was fine. The full horror of what was going on was shown only during the ad break because people couldn't see that there is a lot going on set. Carson called his personal assistant right away. Helper, who rushed forward with a hand towel and hand spray, things that were not used very often in the 1970s, but which Carson was determined to have. There was an extra chair available. Dripping, which needs production helpers to wipe it off with towels before the next person could be put down. The news was the most upsetting of all. That Taylor didn't seem to know anything about because of his state. When a makeup artist came up to me during the break and handing out blotting papers, Taylor kindly turned them down, saying, "Honey, this is how I shine." In terms of looks, Carson did what a set of rules that staff called the Taylor standard of steps to be taken for defense whenever people who were also damp were booked, one of which was a plastic lining. Put in a sneaky way on the guest chair, adding 6 more positions for Carson a few inches farther away from the person than usual, and getting fresh clothes easily reachable in case of an emergency. The Times Taylor was booked on The Tonight Show mysteriously went down after this. Carson never talked about the event in public. People talked about the reason. Years later, a top executive at NBC confirmed that Johnny told the talent the terrible truth. "I don't mind funny books," said. "Can't handle getting lost on my own show. You already know that sherry or Sure's sack was alcohol is added to make it stronger. It's strong." Third, Orson Welles, a hot place for people. Welles was already a regular by the time in the 1970s. There was once the handsome director of Citizen Kane had changed into a physically impressive figure whose genius stayed still whole. But his body had grown to this led to truly shocking levels. A health problem that is so bad that it required specific methods. But anything else in the history of the show, Welles, who was 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighed well over 300 pounds in his old age, made what the crew privately called, also known as the Orson effect, a changes in the temperature that happened within hours after he sat down under the studio lights. And the mix of his a huge frame with many dark layers clothes that were picked to make him look smaller, how big it looks, and the hot lights caused a perfect storm of sweating that made the evil Carson very scared. The heat that came off of him could be felt. A former set worker named Harold Barnes, and we did record a 7-degree the temperature in his immediate nearby. It felt like sitting next to a human engine, and what happened as a result about his own youth was exactly what you might think. The situation was Wells's made things even worse: movement problems, which stopped quick stops to clean up during ad breaks. Instead, the crew worked on built a complicated method that staff papers that were called cooling the Orson, but who on the crew was more honestly, we called it crisis management. Placed industrial strength fans in just off camera, helpers, said director Gary Mitchell. The moment Weffer hit commercial, we'd stride these strong direct fans at Welles to try to dry him before the next part. In the meantime, there would be a rush of makeup artists with product lines made just for it. Was very good at controlling sweating. Just like a NASCAR pit crew at work on a human being. The upsetting truth that what fans never saw was the progress going bad for Welles' freshness while he was making shows usually got there pretty dry and well put together by the 15-minute mark of an interview. His health had usually changed a lot for the worse. Custom-made clothes, even though they were of things that can absorb, would become full to the point where they change texture that can be seen on video. Carson's how people responded to this situation showed both his work and his personal life horror. Microphones sometimes picked up the host, who was slowly smelling Welles. Made especially broad movements, and reaction that can't be stopped to the wave-off smell that went along with these moves. Records of production from a number of Welles. Some of the images are cryptic, telling JC that OW needs more room. Part 2, the most shocking event took place during a summer show in 1975. When the studio's air conditioning broke down, something went wrong during Wells's visit. In just minutes, the director the amount of sweating was so frightening levels where it started to spread out in the open over his clothes, making what one the camera handler was called continental moving designs of water. The situation got so bad that during there was an ad break, Carson was seen moving his chair around a few times. A breach of his perfect location as usual that spoke talks a lot about the visual emergency taking shape. After this visit, Welles needed the help of 2 people production helpers to rise from the guest chair, which had turned into it had to be so fully saturated that it was taken out of the set completely. The terrible truth came out years later, cleaned by a staff member, was that the whole cushion had to be changed. Instead of just being cleaned. What makes this situation so sad? Even with these problems, Carson showed real respect for Welles, smart guy, and kept welcoming him as Carson later told a friend, "There are some people who are worth suffering in pain for. Orson is one of them. But please make sure the heavy-duty fans are ready, in particular by hanging, because it really is 12 chemical weapons used by Truman Capote." How Truman Capote went from writing from Wondermaker to troubling cultural icon over and over in all of his outings on The Tonight Show. In his early trips in the 1960s, Capote was the picture of fiendish beauty. 1970s, though, he had changed into something that the staff of The Tonight Show to whisper frightened details about, as the what people didn't know about Chemical Man was the shocking level of planning had to happen before Capote could even show up on film. Makeup makers talked about the Capote challenge, which tries to make the clearly getting worse author presentable. Even though one stylist called it a piece of art that had been through war, the skin was grayish, and no amount of the use of makeup could fully fix. Diane Forrester, a makeup artist for a long time, there was a lot of blood in his eyes, which was very scary. And his personal cleanliness had gotten so bad that point where we had to grow certain methods just to hide the problems that are most obvious. Had what the staff called the full Capote, a process with several steps that used a strong makeup to hide capillaries that are broken, extra strength powder to soak up extra oil that would show up in minutes under the lights. This is the most upsetting thing of all. Manufactured cologne made especially for to hide what one process worker referred to as the clear flour off someone who had been drinking for several days in a row. Carson's response to late period Capote showed how skilled he is and how much his own pain hurt him. Entertainer, who could pick up on the smallest something wrong with the way he looks, himself sitting next to a man who more and more like as one crew while member crewee was being honest, something that had been saved for a short time from a shipwreck. Johnny came up with what we called the capote position years as a camera operator Mitchell Stevens. He was going to start talks in his usual stance, but as the segments went on, and capote the lights turned on the smells, Carson would slowly raise the price of the were far apart by the third segment, he was almost hanging off the chair's edge. It was quiet enough for people to not notice, but big enough that we had to make changes camera settings to make up for it. One shocking thing about Capote's looks was what the staff called the situation with cologne. With outre to hide the fact that he isn't fresh, Capote started wearing more and more strong smells. These strong smells with his natural one radio technician who worked in liked the idea of an old mill experience, such a complicated and difficult thing to do from 10 feet away, it will make your eyes water. During one especially upsetting time when he first showed up in 1979, Capote looked like the same clothes looked like it had been worn for days. Makeup and clothing did their best team, they couldn't totally hide what the production log politely says called proof of recent dining, more wear and tear on his jacket. Sadly, it looks like he had applied cologne several times without taking a bath while tools are running, making what something scientists would call a layering effect off smell on top of the biological the truth below. Johnny's response was thought back on something I'll never forget. Linda Martinez works as a production helper. He looked at her during the ad break. She told Ed McMahon in a whisper, "I think someone is using chemicals to hurt me," he said. Asked his personal helper to come over and had his jacket taken off and put on with the same one because he was sure that Capote's scent had spread onto his clothes. The terrifying ending of the cleanliness story on Capote's Tonight Show came during one of his last shows on the show. Clearly shaky and sweating a lot, Capote began to shine under the lights. What one member of the group called waves off sour perfume and physical pain. The situation got so bad that Carson, when he took a break from his ideal hosting procedure, in fact stood getting up during Capote's story, allegedly to show something, but in reality to get away from the nearby area for a short time. After that part, Johnny had a 30-second commercial break. Added seconds, junior director said Pete Coleman. He made use of that time to in the wings, they gasped for air. Before going back. It was the only time ever seen him work hard to keep your cool. Despite these problems, Carson kept getting Capote out of respect for how important his writing is and for a long time at work together, but after a particularly hard according to looks, Carson would do what the Capote recovery protocol, a process with several steps such as changing his clothes and using onique rinse and having the guest chair taken away to be cleaned thoroughly before there was room for one more person. I look like a mess and it felt like one. Not at all. 1. Biohazard alert for Charles Bukowski. What if Johnny Carson was the best example of polish for TV? Charles Bukowski played his antimatter, a deliberate not following any cleanliness rules Carson held holy. The author known as the laureate of the American Life brought an original whiff of his crash style to The Tonight Show, making what is still the most famous health disaster in the long past of the program. What made Bukowski's 1975 look wasn't special. Just the usual problems that come up in Aguist who was messy. It was the fact that his own scent actually triggered a sentence in NBC's deal with its technical staff about when job conditions are dangerous. As soon as Bukowski got to the studio, at first, people were stunned. Shock, remembered talent coordinator Richard Peterson. He wasn't just going to and get ready for a national interview on TV. He seemed to have worked to create a state of biological discomfort that didn't go away. Common way to describe something. Artists, usually not refundable after many years of working with famous people in different states, recorded their meeting with a candor that has never been seen before in the production notes. The subject seems to have more than one layer of body odor, referring to a long time without hair, has unknown substances in things and maybe even small insects. Skin has a film that doesn't let standard products that clean. Breath suggests there may be times when medical help is needed. The horrible truth was that Bukowski had been there for 48 hours before during his interview on The Tonight Show, what he thought was right. Getting ready, a constant drinking binge, different dive bars in Los Angeles. When they got to the studio, not only not ready, but also actively getting worse. The clothing area really refused to touch his jacket. It was found. Michael Coleman is an assistant director. Used hangers and tongs made of wood to his clothes, and the head of the closet said they would make a union complaint if it was her job to make physical Carson's things come into contact with. Response to meeting Bukowski for the first time made what employees still call the famous moment, a split-second breach in the host's perfect business attire front that showed the shocking. As Bukowski got closer, he saw the truth below. For their welcome before the show, Carson seemed to flinch and make an impulsive step backwards before getting Johnny's face went through some about 5 words in 1 second, remembered Thomas Wilson, the stage manager. Outrage, disgust, fear, resignation. After that, his work mask clicked. Put back where it belongs. It was like seeing a stun gun was used to hit someone and get better right away. The interview itself turned into a test for Carson's extraordinary efficiency. Sitting next to what one camera operator called a human research dish, Carson said his interested in focused attitude while using all of their fighting strategies in his arsenal. He set himself up at the farthest distance possible while still looking like a chat, angled his body a little farther away while keeping his turned their face toward Bukowski, and this is what the staff called the emergency breath technique for breathing, mostly through his mouth to block out smells as much as possible. The upsetting truth behind the scenes was that Carson was really feeling physical pain during the part. During the first ad break, long-term personal helper ran to the host with a towel that had mentholated oil put on them, a trick used in theater when players have to show up in scenes with a lot of it smells. Johnny was actually nauseated, confirmed William, a production helper turner. I could see him taking a breath several times during Bukowski's answers, the sign that someone is fighting not to throw up, but on camera, he looked like he did. Without a worry in the world. The best show I've ever seen. It got to the point of panic during the second part, when the studio lights, which were getting hot Bukowski for a few minutes, turned on. What one terrified sound engineer. This is known as the full aromatic experience. The sense of smell got so strong that a camera the operator was placed close to the conversation. The area allegedly had to be fixed up after going through what the production log defined as eye-watering without wanting to making it harder for him to stay focused. Years later, the most shocking news came out later, when Carson's personal doctor made sure that the person had actually needed medical attention after the talk with Bukowski. Johnny migraine pain that was so bad that needed to take prescription drugs. In 2010, Samuel Richards said he talked to him on the phone from his changing room right away after the taping, and I had to give them something. It was stronger than the medicine he usually took. They told me it was because of what he said. It was sensory attack during the. What makes this story interesting? What's most interesting is that despite Carson later talked about this upsetting event put together, that Bukowski had been one of the most interesting people he's had. Glory doesn't always smell good. That's great, he allegedly said. The cost of being real. The guest chair, what used to be Bukowski's seat, became the about what staff called the great cleaning argument, with some people saying it should be cleaned by professionals and others insisted it should be fully replaced. Several accounts say that the chair was finally taken away from the set and never came back. The only time in the history of the show that a piece of furniture was bought shut down because of a guest's personal cleanliness.